A second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as printed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Public input. Has anybody got anything to say in public input that talk about that's not on the agenda?
Tom, you can go ahead.
Okay, hang on, I just have to, okay, first of all, I just wanted to comment, the other day, the, fire alarm went off at the school, we're still trying to adjust it, and there was just a situation that, nothing emergency-wise, but it did set the fire alarm off. One of the things I would like to, comment on is, when we got out and started going back in, I did notice the, Harlan Boardmaker, and I did notice our local, police department were right there, I mean, the response that they had, that day that the alarm went off, I want to commend them and all the other first responders for what they did. And that was, well noted not only by me, but a lot of other, in the school system. Also, I wasn't able to stop in Monday morning, but I wanted to congratulate Terry. I think it was you can correct me, Shayla, but I think it was 27 years working at the city.
Correct.
But, so I want to, congratulate Terry. The only thing that puts me a little bit on the old block, because it doesn't seem that long ago he was sitting in the government class, but oh well, such is life. So anyway, I wanted to congratulate him too as well. So anyway, that's all I had. Thank you.
Is there anything else for public input? Hearing none, we'll go on to department head reports. Has anybody got anything to report or questions to ask from the department heads?
Do we need to approve the police chief going to the sheriff's and police chief's conference?
We did.
Yeah, that
We
was
did?
done already.
Okay, never mind.
Good night.
Is there anything else? Terry, do you have anything to report from the airport conference?
It's a good conference, and more of you should have went, so there's a lot of stuff to learn with them things.
Do you have anything you want to bring up that we should know from that?
Well, they went through a lot of stuff, there's, 2 days, or a day and a half, or some of them got cut off, because, the weather was gonna get bad, and, pass this around, you can look at it. Because they went over flight standards and environmental stuff and general aviation and FBOs, flight training updates, and they told about the SDSU and the Watertown VOTEX for aviation, and they're in the need for students. There's lots of jobs in that area. So, pretty interesting.
Anything else? I've got one thing, I listened in on the meeting with DENR on trying to get our funds that we can use from phase 2 and 3 we can use some of them we can transfer them over to where we can get this paving done. And other stuff, so that went through this like,
Yeah, you said that sounded pretty good for funding. And here's a list of the names of the people out there at the airport thing.
is there anything else?
Just to add to mine, we'll be certifying our mosquito foggers, believe it or not, in a week, 2 weeks. It's a little early, but one year we had trouble, so. But both of them have to be certified or you can't use it. So Dave and I will be gone for a day, pretty much. And sometimes you're in and out, sometimes you're there for a while, depends on how many show up for certifying some, they have to run them through a few times, sometimes you're in and out. So, but that's coming.
Is there anything else? If not, we'll go to number one for new business, which is Ron Hofteaser with mower bid, found on page 12.
Basically, I got a couple bids to replace the mower we sold last year. I was gonna try to do it, sell them every 3 years, but I'm bumping it to 4 and 5 years. The one we got rid of last year was having a few things, so we, got ahead everything. Basically, the 652, it's basically the same grave leaves we've had over the years, and that's 12.5. What I have in my budget, did you say 12.4?
I think 12.5, wasn't it?
12.5? Anyway, if it's a little over, I can get it out of my street budget, cause we do use them mowers for the street department. We do that all the time, we always move around, like my Bobcat, it's down there as much as it's works for us, so. The 552, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is, that this 652 was, the different, I'm hoping in a year to put a bagger on it. And it's a bagger that you can just dump without having to get out and carry the bags, cause them things, they get pretty heavy, cause they're a big mower. And then in time, I was gonna replace the Dixon with that in maybe a couple, 2-3 years to take care of the pool, so. Cause the Dixon's time, it's time for it to go, but right now, this will be down the park one will move to the ballpark, and the one at the ballpark goes to the airport. So in time, so this road, keep it from the, like say, maybe move it from the airport to the street shop, and then it'll be just kind of a roamer / swimming pool with a bagger kind of purpose on it.
These are all the same width?
52.
Okay, all right.
Where are these from?
Titan is the 2 Graveleys and the 2 deer are obviously from G&H or whatever it is anymore. I don't even know. What? C&D. I knew it was wrong, but I knew it was
Close enough.
Yeah, it's still green line for me, so.
So are you thinking you want the 652 then?
I would prefer it,
You prefer that one?
And you do have 25.
huh?
I just looked, you do.
And I
have
do,
25.
and that is what okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve purchase of the Gravely 652.
I'm gonna remove myself from this vote for obvious reasons.
I'll second it.
I was gonna go for that for the second.
You wanna purchase one of these tonight?
Yeah, if I could, so we can get it ordered and in before
Okay.
our snow leaves, if it leaves.
We have a motion and a second for the,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Which one did you want?
652, the top one.
To buy number 652 for $12,500. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Thank you.
I was an eye on that too, Sheila.
all right, thank you.
Okay, number 2, DGR Electric Department 12-year study.
I just wanted to step up here and say we went ahead and did this 10-year study probably about a year and a half ago, and it's been tough for me to figure out when the best time to do this. So I appreciate everybody that's running for showing up. I feel this is a way to educate everybody all at the same time with whatever happens. So I guess with that, I'll let Jared take it with DGR. And
right. Thanks, everybody, for having me here, giving me the opportunity to talk about the electric system long-range plan update that we did. Yeah, Dustin said we started a couple years ago on this probably, but every between 5 and 10 years, we need to look at the electric system, need to look at the loading situation. What's the growth, continue to stay on top of the age and condition of equipment. So that's kind of the genesis of us doing a long-range plan update. Briefly, I'll just talk about DGR Engineering. We're headquartered out of Rock Rapids, Iowa. We do a lot of work for municipals in the South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa region. Pretty large tri-state footprint there. And our department in Rock Rapids has about 40 or so folks. We also have water resources, engineering, and civil engineering as well as some generation engineering, etc. So we get about 150 employees company-wide in 3 different offices. So just a little bit about me. I started in 2009 with a consulting firm, and then with DGR since 2011. And I went to School Mines out in Rapid City, South Dakota for my college. But anyway, enough about me and the crew that I'm with. But what I wanted to touch on was a little bit of a historical perspective with the projects we've done with the City of Miller. Dustin said he was going to have a big crowd, so it's a little nerve-wracking. But I wanted to give you an idea of where things started in case you guys were new to the electric system and haven't been on the council and haven't necessarily gotten in depth at all in the history of the electric system here in City of Miller. So, and then after we touched on that briefly, the historical aspect, I wanted to review, you know, what's the goal, what we were trying to do here with the long-range plan, and go through some of the results of our analysis, and then provide some recommendations to correct some of the deficiencies that were identified in the planning phase of the project. So back in 2008, kind of maybe between 2008, 2009, I can't remember, but I wasn't involved at that time. I was still in my last year of college, but that's when we started working for the City of Miller, and Bill Llewellyn kind of spearheaded that effort, I believe, to look at the existing electric system in 2008, and again, look at the situation with load growth, look at the age and condition of the existing 2 substations, and set a path forward for modernizing the electric system. So at that time in that study, there were 3 areas of improvements identified. After that first study, there was about $6.4 million in improvements that were made in phases 1 and 2 of that 3-phase plan. Those were wrapped up in 2012. And then kind of culminated with about 50% of the distribution system converted from a 4.16 kV overhead system that was aged and had been weathered over the years, and upgraded the voltage for more efficient power flow on the system, also burying half the town at that time. So after that first study, we buried half the town and decommissioned one of the oldest substations, substation number 1, as we'll refer to it as. See, constructed substation number 3 to replace that old substation. So, just a little summary there, about $6.4 million in improvements. That's a picture of old sub number 1, 2006 photo there. Didn't do a study till about 2008, it looks like. And then after about 9 years, we took another look at it, the system, looked at the improvements implemented to date, and basically went forward with replacing substation number 2. So you had 2 substations, both were pretty old. One was, I think substation number 2 was built in the 70s. I was just visiting with Dustin about it. And substation 1 was, I believe, far older than that. So that was identified as a potential weak point, or was the weak point on your guys' system. And plus the remaining overhead electric was still hanging out there. So you had 2 voltages you guys were having to deal with. So after that long-range plan update in 2017, we went forward with basically completing the remaining improvements that were recommended in the first phase, or the first study. And we designed, and the city of Miller built substation number 4, converted the rest of the overhead electric to underground with the 12.5 voltage, and decommissioned substation number 2. So we also reconstructed the 69 kV transmission line that the remnants of it remain on that quarter line south and east of, I think that'd be, don't know my streets very well in town here, but anyway, there's still some remnants of the old line that was old, and it's been replaced now, brought out to the paved road down to the Northwestern Tie substation. So also we implemented a SCADA network where the electric system can be monitored and operated from the office or from the substations. So a lot of work there that was done, about 5.5 million of improvements in that, after that second long-range plan update. So old substation number 2 that was decommissioned there. And just kind of for a visual aid, the first phases 1 and 2 of that initial study on the west side of town there, that was the initial conversion. And then in 2018, 2019 timeframe, we converted the rest of town to underground on the east side there. Just kind of an aerial view of it. Little hard to see here, but this just kind of shows where those substations are. Substation 3 in the north part of town. Substation 4 that was recently built down there on 3rd Street. And substation 1 and 2, the old 41.6 subs, they've been decommissioned. So what I wanted to do is quantify some of the impact of taking action initially when those recommendations were made. I really credit the staff at City of Miller and the council here, mayor and everybody involved in making those decisions. It was proved to be a real wise decision to do those improvements right away, because what we found, especially in the last couple years, is the inflation situation and the major supply chain issues that are going on right now in the utility market. I'd say this is a pretty conservative estimate, but I'd say that if you guys were to not have done those improvements, it'd cost you at least twice of what it would cost today. And we do have clients that chose that route and now they're paying more, but because you still need those improvements, they're just paying twice as much now. So it's really saved you guys a lot of money in the long run. It's really a great story here with the electric system. It's kind of one of the, when we're marketing to folks, trying to get new clients, Miller's kind of our gold standard for municipal, the way that you guys implemented our recommendations and did so with very, I'd say, not nothing, but pretty modest rate adjustments over the years. So that I just wanted to tip my hat to you guys. Thank you guys for sticking with us, carrying out the plan. Can't thank you enough. It's been fun to see it kind of culminate, and you guys have basically a very good municipal distribution system that a lot of other municipals would be pretty envious of. So enough about that. So moving forward here, first of all, any questions on the historical side of things, just kind of fluffy, good news stuff for everybody to digest. So in this case, here for this study, we wanted to, take another, update the loads that we see. We have a software model of your guys' electric distribution system with the new improvements you guys have made over the last 10 years. Review the age and condition of some of the things that we maybe didn't address early on is the transmission network. You guys have a loop feed, 69 kV transmission system. You're actually fortunate to have a loop transmission system. So you have
You're back. Yeah, well, he got.
Any question? No. So, so you guys have, just real briefly, you guys' internal system, you have 69 kV transmission, which you own, a loop, a 2-mile loop in between the sub 3 and sub 4, and actually down to the south part of town, there's an interconnection phase shifting tie with Northwestern Energy. You guys receive your normal source from. And then you have a back feed with East River, a separate utility. So that's really a nice situation is if one of the utilities has issues, you guys can be backfed by the other utility, which is a separate network, separate equipment. So there's a good level of redundancy there built in. What we want to do here is identify any of those remaining deficiencies in the system and obviously recommend improvements and then do cost estimates for you guys to plan with. So you guys own about 3 miles of 69 kV transmission. So the tall structures, the only overhead you guys have left that's serving any load in your city limits. Really, I don't want to elaborate too much on the substation stuff. It's just kind of boring. But one of the aspects that's kind of unique is there's a phase shifting transformer south of town where you have East River and you have Northwestern and they're out of phase slightly. There's a phase shift electrically. So you need that transformer to tie so you can switch load between. And so that tie transformer is necessary to rotate the phases properly so you can be synced in with the two separate utilities. So that's kind of an interesting fact here. Like I said, we wanted to take another fresh look at the load situation. We look at your historical peak demand for this community, and we extrapolate that out, and we basically budget in about a 1 to 2% increase. Pretty modest growth, especially if you figure that the way that electric vehicles are being pushed right now by mostly government trying to force that. We feel like that's probably gonna not happen real quick, just based on supply chain issues and just practicality. We still got plenty of snow and looking at another snowstorm, so electric vehicles don't really do well in the extreme climates that the upper Midwest is used to seeing. So we're a little skeptical that there's gonna be this broad transformation of the transportation network to EV. Mostly, like I said, practical. Just gonna take time. We don't have the materials to get things built for what we need today. So, but if you factor in any EV load growth, then things change quite a bit, and that load profile looks a little bit different. So just to kind of add a little bit of color here, your guys' existing, system peak is in that 7, I believe 6 point, here, let me see. Yeah, 6.8 kW. About 7 kW, I think, is the historical peak. But you guys peak in the winter. So it's because you're heating loads and it's cold in this part of the world. And if you don't have natural gas, your heating is done by the electric system. So that's pretty normal for municipals, your guys' makeup on the generation side. Your summer peak is quite a bit lower. So that's what really drives the improvements are the winter demand. And so, like I said, we just kind of budget in about a 1% growth over the next 10 years just to make sure we're covering our bases and there's not any weak points for building out that future growth if and when it does happen. So we do look at some criteria for designing and laying out these distribution systems. You want to have single contingency on all levels of your electric system. So if you lose any one piece of equipment, you need to be able to backfeed that and continue service with ANSI Class A voltage service, which means basically just a threshold of voltage that doesn't cause equipment to, fail on, brownout or anything like that, any low voltage situations. And then of course you don't want to, over capacity your underground cable and your pad mount equipment. So we're looking at all the ratings of your equipment at the same time. And then you also want to build in some growth to where if a commercial customer comes in and wants to put in a, little manufacturing facility or any kind of a commercial load that's a pretty, centralized load, you want to be able to accommodate that growth without having to immediately, go and buy a bunch of equipment and expand the system on the fly when you can't, plan for it financially. So those are the things we want to make sure that electric system can cover. Here's just a kind of a simplified voltage chart here, but really we're analyzing this portion of the voltage drop profile is the primary distribution system. And then if we maintain a modest level of drop on your primary, then you can run your secondaries, and then there's all this drop that's got to take place all the way to your outlet in your house. So we got to maintain very minor voltage drop here so you can do all the stuff that you want to with your service voltage. And that varies wildly on the secondary side. So the standard's been served us well for the municipal systems that we've analyzed over the last 50 years or so, as long as we've been doing it. We have a software model that basically we input all the ratings and the conductor sizes and the physical dimensions of everything into a software model, and that helps us to quickly analyze and flag any deficiencies. So, really for your guys' load growth, we have situated, kind of get out your crystal ball and try to identify where loads are going to be growing. And, we have some areas of town that we've allocated additional load growth with. Overall, we're looking at about 750 kW plus about 100 of residential growth. So you're looking at, 850 kW. And that actually, to put it in perspective, I guess, the EV charging stations, the level 3 chargers, the minimum size for those are 750 kW. So you guys could add at least one level 3 charger and be able to handle that without any problems. So you could actually probably go beyond that, but that's just what we looked at for this study. So for the foreseeable future, we don't anticipate any needs to add based on capacity. So there's a list of deficiencies here because there's just always something that you got to be looking at. But basically what hasn't been addressed on your guys' electric system is the transmission line, the high voltage transmission that feeds your north, I guess from the south actually, a little backwards there, but you have about a 3-mile stretch of transmission that you own, and the lower half from the Northwestern Tie substation up to sub 3 is all new, and that looks good. There's about a 2-mile stretch that needs to be rebuilt that was constructed around the 1960s, and then a shorter portion in town was in the 70s that was built. So when you just look at things to plan for, you look at getting 40 to 50 years out of any kind of utility transmission-related equipment is kind of the limit there. And as, of course, as the older it gets, the more the poles rot, the insulators could potentially fail. Like anything, there's a lifespan, and it's good to stay out in front of that. So that's probably one of the primary, basically your only age and condition issues that you have are related to the old transmission line. You guys have some 69 kV switches that are kind of not functional today, so you're having to utilize your transmission switches. Well, it's hard to explain, but there's a one-way switch in the north side of town that's motor operable, but it doesn't function properly, so it's not used. So you're having to use other switch equipment that you can't operate with your SCADA controls. So that's just one deficiency that we would recommend adding that motor operability and include that into your SCADA system. So you could control that during a storm event from the office. You could operate that. Then likewise, the Northwest Tie substation is the transformer was built installed in about 1990, so you're sitting fine there in terms of the age of that transformer. The high voltage breaker down in that substation is pretty rough looking. We just put Dustin did a little bit of work on that the last couple of years, so the SF6 gas breaker is currently operating fine. But in the next cycle, we need to start looking at budgeting for that, replacement of that, just due to the life cycle. Basically is expired in the 30 to 40 year period is for the Northwestern sub equipment. So there are some issues there with the Northwestern sub where, and I refer to it as the Northwestern sub because that's where you tie with them. You guys own the substation, just to be clear. It's more of just a descriptive reason for that. But the site is old. Dustin's been maintaining it and putting some work into that to keep that going as it is today. However, there's the old control building there, and the relaying and controls is very old. So one of the things that Northwestern, reason they offloaded that is they didn't want to make any investments in it for the most part. And they wouldn't unless there's local interest in doing that. So that was a real benefit of obtaining that substation is you guys can control the quality and the level, the aging condition of it. You can maintain it, I guess. So I guess where I'm going with it is that substation, the controls are basically antiquated in that sub. There are some clearance issues in that substation where you have some 69 kV PTs and CTs that are about eye level if you're walking out there. And it's kind of weird because that type of equipment needs to be out of arm's reach because it's fairly high voltage. So there's some safety concerns there in and out of there if you ever have to operate anything. That stuff just wasn't designed with the safety in mind that needed to be at the time. And I can't say why, I don't know why, but that's just the case there. And I do have some pictures of that. Real quickly before I get into some of those pictures, to touch on the distribution system that you guys have, effectively upgraded and rebuilt over the last 10 years, there really are no deficiencies to the distribution system. Not to say something couldn't happen and you're gonna have your dig-ins, you're gonna have your pad mount, weird, unplanned issues like with any electric system, but really you got a really robust distribution network that is gonna be very reliable for you guys for the foreseeable future. Your transformers are all adequately sized. You're gonna have good voltage until you guys double your load, essentially, and maybe even beyond that, but we only look in increments. But really, like I said, because of the investments you guys have made, it's really paid off, so. You know, really, I'll just get to some of these pictures to add a little bit of color. So this is your existing transmission line that we're targeting for replacement. You know, that's a 1960s style construction, call it wishbone or a TSZ. It's just old. It served its purpose. The spans are longer. The design standards were different back then. They didn't care back then if the lines slapped together with some ice on them and there's flicker, and it didn't bother anybody back then because there weren't all these electronics that get interrupted. The VFD drives that, you know, consumers, you know, need to be operating all the time. So, it's an old design and it was a good one, but we're replacing that stuff whenever we see it. Just a few more pictures of that. This is out north of town there. As it goes out the quarter line there off 3rd Street, and then it heads back west over to get to the north, or the sub 3 there on the north side of town. This is the Northwest Tie substation here, and this guy right here, if you guys can see the dot that I'm putting on the screen, that's a 69 kV breaker. So that's the one that Dustin's been spent some time working on a little bit, and he's been successful getting that thing. We've tested it out recently. I think we did some work on the transformer too, Dustin.
Yep.
So just some kind of routine maintenance stuff. And so this stuff is still set up to succeed here for at least the next few years. But what we do have towards the end of the priorities and the capital improvements plan is, you know, at some point you do have to start budgeting for replacement of that. So we just identify that, push that out there in terms of something you can plan for. As you can tell, you know, compared to your other substations in town, you have these lattice steel towers. They're just real big and bulky. These appear to be in pretty good condition. There's actually a whole lot of steel for what it's supporting out there. So, you know, structural integrity isn't really the issue here, but you will, if you're ever to go out there and look, there's a lot of old, I believe there's some old, you know, bushings and things like that probably need to be upgraded in the future, but not really a pressing issue at this time. Here's a close-up on the breaker. It probably looks worse than it is. It's actually, you know, the fading of that more has to do with just paint, but I think it's sitting in pretty good shape. Dustin is what I think we all kind of determined there. Dustin's already mentioned to me that he's kind of fixed up the site here a little bit with the fence, but just goes to show you that erosion takes place over time, and when nobody's monitoring it, like when Northwestern owned it, when you don't have, you know, vested interest keeping an eye on it, things kind of go to heck on you, and you got to maintain that stuff. So Dustin's putting some time into that, and I think we're in decent shape there in terms of the existing site. Here's kind of where the deficiencies, more or less, kind of are centralized here. This is the control building on the right side there. It's very undersized, and when you open the door and you go inside, there's a DC battery bank there that's kind of right in your business there. But then there's an old relay panel here, and those relays are antiquated. They're electromechanicals. They really do just need to be replaced in the next, you know, probably as soon as you guys can plan for it and budget for it. So here's the kind of the safety issue as I see it here. These need to be mounted about, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet higher than where these are located at right now. So this is high voltage transmission coming in and out of these instrumentation transformers. That's the metering equipment for Northwestern. So yeah, just not comfortable with where these are mounted here. I mean, this is, you can just reach over and touch that with your hand, and that should not be the case because, you know, just for safety purposes. So all said and done, we put together estimates for phases, how we would stage them ideally. So for phase 1 improvements, we would have them identified as things needing to be addressed in the next couple years, is the 69 kV transmission upgrade. So we'd rebuild from the East River source up north to sub 4, the new substation. Includes removals, replacement of some of the Northwestern switch equipment in that same project. There's some improvements here that I'm gonna touch on here in a little bit when we start talking about grant opportunity that we're coming up to. But one of the other highlights of this is we would be installing a optical ground wire fiber network between the substations. Right now there's a wireless network, and that's not as reliable, not as dependable in winter weather, thunderstorms, etc. When you rebuild that line, it makes sense to run the fiber comm through the static, through the shield wire, for very incremental cost increase. That gives you a hard line, secure intranet for your communications between the substations and the office. So that's one area of improvement that is really worth doing, in our opinion. Especially if you can get Uncle Sam to help out and pay for some of it. So CIP Phase 2 would be spending some money on the Northwestern Tie substation. There's, some of the major materials would be some switch equipment, a new control house. It's actually sized adequately according to code requirements, has actual DC battery bank designed for the existing components and additional in the future if ever added. Includes expansion of that Northwestern sub-site to include that larger control building where you can have your control panels and your house power and everything fitting into about a 16 by 20 building, roughly. Might be a little smaller than that, depends on the design there, but there's control wiring and relaying that needs to get included in that as well. So Phase 2 there is about $900,000 for those upgrades, and we would, stage that after the transmission, in the next, 5 to 6 years. And then, like I said before, Phase 3 would be consist of replacing that phase shifting transformer at the end of its usable life. You don't have to, budget anything for the next year or 2 or 3, but at the end of the 10-year cycle, you need to look at it and at least weigh the costs and continue to test it on an annual basis to make sure that the oil is still in good condition, and monitor the bushings and just routine inspection and maintenance that comes with operating a transformer. So, the one line's probably pretty meaningless to most folks here, but I'll just kind of run through it. Schematically speaking, Phase 1 would consist of replacement of the transmission in these clouded areas here. Here's your guys' sub 3 and then sub 4, which you guys recently built in the last 10 years. Here we would install that optical ground wire from all the way from the north sub 3 down to the Northwestern sub, and you'd have your communication network there. And then updating the controls for the Northwestern Tie switch down there, where you guys would be able to operate that. When you do get a storm event, which you've had some transmission interruptions with Northwestern's line. They have some older transmission line out there, so sometimes you do get disruptions, and Dustin's called out there in a storm. It's never a nice day. And he has to operate those transmission switches. And if you can get motor operators on there with communications to your guys' office or at one of the substations, you can operate those switches much quicker than having to run back and forth between subs, glove up, in the rain, touching a big old steel structure, cranking that control rod, and watching the arc above your head. Not something I do, and I do respect those that do it. And getting motor operators on there that function properly with SCADA operation is the way I would do it if I was having to operate the transmission system. So I put myself in your shoes and I think about, what's a good way to address reliability and reduce outages. This is the number one way you guys can do that on your guys' system right now. Because primarily, all of your outages in the last couple years, probably, maybe beyond that, it's been transmission related. So, any questions on that? I'm kind of going long, I feel like. Justin? You this if you want. So all in all, 10-year capital improvements plan, about 3.3 million. Again, prioritizing the transmission rebuild, motor operator installation with the SCADA integration with those motor operators. Some improvements there at the Northwestern tie switch tie station. And then phase 3, again, looking way out there, no reason to run and buy a transformer right now, but a cost to consider in the future for your planning purposes. All right, so recently, in the last month here, we've kind of spearheaded, or not spearheaded, but I guess spearheaded for Miller anyway, but we were aware of, it was brought to our attention that there was going to be some opportunity for a large regional grant application to try to get some funds through the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that was passed here about a year ago now, I suppose. Basically, this is a federal grant covering 50% of the project, where the utility has to come up with the other 50. So it's a matching grant. And MREA, it's Minnesota Rural Electric Association, they're basically, because the way that this big government program was set up was basically they wanted to do it across about 9 projects. And so you had basically like $2 billion or something like that for 9 projects. So do the math, and it's like, well, that's not going to be for us or any of our clients. That's spoken for, is basically what that looked like. Weren't going to really be considered. Well, some smart folks up there in Minnesota, they had a plan here to pool a large regional collection of projects and present it to the federal government as a single application. So instead of just one large project, they made a large project combining a whole bunch of these municipal projects and rural projects. So the goal with being about a $500 million project between all of them. So what we've done is tried to get our ducks in a row and contact our clients and see where applicable we could qualify for grants. And actually, the City of Miller's projects look to be in line with a lot of the grid innovation requirements that were listed in the grant. So it wasn't just for any rebuilds, normal stuff. They needed to see that innovative component for them to feel good about, I guess. So the fact is that, the stuff that the city needs here is actually innovative, SCADA integration, motor operated switches on the transmission system, that all kind of fit in that criteria. So we see it as a big opportunity here to kind of strike while the iron's hot. And if you guys, we've basically been working on the paperwork, Dustin and Shayla here, trying to get things submitted. And there's like an April 10th deadline here that we're sitting pretty good with. So yeah, in May, there's going to be this formal application. Really right now, the only money to be spent is that needs to be committed from the council right now is a $1,500 application fee for the grant writing people. So what we found out is to get any of this federal grant money, you got to be like a grant writer. So you got to know, what strings to pull. You got to know how to craft things eloquently to where the federal people put a lot of value on, apparently. And we're just kind of regular engineers, so we're not good at that. So there's grant writers involved to kind of carry the water, so to speak, for the actual application. So what we're doing as engineers and regional, small utilities, we're inputting all this information for the grant writers to assemble this package they're gonna present to the federal government, the Department of Energy, I believe. And then you'll know about that award sometime in like July, August timeframe. We don't have a certain, for sure date, but, that's the only thing you're really on the hook for. So I guess we'd be seeking, and that doesn't go to us, that's a pass-through to the grant writers. That's basically all you're on the hook for right now is a $1,500 application fee, which isn't nothing, but they gotta cover their grant writing costs, so it's probably fair there. Like I said, we'll know about that in late summer. And so what that does is basically pays for about 50% of your phase 1 and phase 2 for your guys' capital improvements. So in the electric utility world, that's kind of a big deal because we haven't historically seen a lot of opportunities for the federal grants. So there's little programs here and there, but that's new. And so we're gonna try to take advantage of it here and get some infrastructure paid for. So yeah, and really you gotta do a little massaging when you're submitting for these grants, in terms of highlighting the things that really apply. But yeah, your guys' projects we feel are applicable. They've already gone through like a preliminary review where there are no issues identified. So your grant portion would be about $1 million. So of the 2.1 million of phases 1 and 2, $1 million would potentially be paid for. So now with that, there's some paperwork, there's kind of some headaches that come with the federal money that we will be learning about in the process. And so I guess the other part of it is as far as authorization, we're probably looking at like a preliminary planning phase, getting through this, scoping out the project, kind of on an hourly estimate basis where I plugged in about 15,000 because I don't know what that's gonna be, but it's kind of as required. As things come up, if they need more engineering information, we can provide it. The $15,000 will kind of, scope out the final plan here before you can commence with final design and material procurement. So that stuff is just kind of an estimate there. So these are your costs essentially, and what we would look for authorization for, or at least to proceed with this stuff when the time comes, when we do hear back on that grant. Also, there's a letter of commitment required, not today or anything, but by the 5th of May, we'll work with Shayla and Dustin, but if the council's good to go, they'll need to come up. There's a boilerplate format that I can get to you, Shayla, depending on what you guys think of it, but we can help you fill that in and you guys can sign it and send it, and that's kind of all you need at this point. So next steps here are to basically take any input that you guys have, finalize the documentation here, the study, the executive summary I've sent out. If there's any changes, we'll work those out. Looking at the financial side of things, really a lot of it hinges on this grant reward, and we're optimistic that you got a good shot at getting this, but we don't know. So that's kind of hanging out there in the balance a little bit. And again, if you guys authorize that application fee, and then at some point we'll just do the planning work when that time comes. The tentative timeline would be, design sometime here in the next year or so, and then construction 25, probably 2026. But a lot of transmission materials are out a year or more. So you're having to design stuff earlier to get the quantities and get the purchase orders out, giving these people a year to get stuff pulled together and dropped off. So with that, are there any questions about what I just covered here?
guess I'm gonna add a little bit to this, so we're pretty fortunate that we did this plan to look ahead. Basically because it put us on the top of the list for you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we already had a lot of the work already done. So that was a big thing, and then to have something like this come along where we can actually have some, grants to help us out. Honestly, phase one would be pretty tough to pull off by itself with any grant. But then to be able to maybe pull off both of them and cut that in half, that's huge.
Yeah, like you said, you know, you guys having the plan in place for the most part. We had to kind of massage some of the descriptions and stuff, pretty minor, but that's just the benefit of having a plan that you're staying up on, because like he said, when we were like, well, we need to think of clients that need this work, well, we already had these projects identified. All we had to do is basically talk to Dustin, like, hey, let's go for it, and it's been all the difference in the world, because we do have a lot of clients that just didn't do studies, or they didn't have any planning whatsoever. They don't even have a distribution model. We just didn't have time to get anything together for them, so it's a great point, Dustin.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, in my budget this year, I did put in my budget this year for him to do some of the pre-planning. I think that was one of the things you were asking about. Right now, you're thinking 15,000 or whatever. I've actually budgeted more for that. But I guess here and now, I kinda need you guys to approve so we can, get our 1,500 in there, so we can see if we can get some free money, I guess. And then also, if you guys would go through and give Jared the authorization, he's gonna have to do some of this planning as he's going through to help with that. So,
I have a question. Did you say that Miller's gonna get 50% grant funding, or still working on the amount of grant funding?
Yeah, so it's, the status is it's still, the application is on middle of May, where the formal application is gonna be sent. Now, what's interesting here is there was a preliminary review process where these projects were screened, because the grant writers kinda could tell what was gonna go, what wasn't. And Miller's made it in, very minor adjustment. We were thinking about doing an underground fiber portion, just from the office. You could tie in, underground fiber, and it ended up being like, our estimate was like $80,000. They said, you know, can you reduce that scope a little bit? We pulled that out, low hanging fruit, but by and large, the improvements as we had put them in are good to go from what they've provided feedback for. And so after that application is done, the $1,500 is paid. Late summer is when we'll know formally from the powers that be if the projects are a go. So sounds like there's pretty good feedback based on some of the high level discussions going on between grant writers and the federal government, so.
So we're not guaranteed 50%? Yeah.
Not yet, no. If you get approved, it's 50%. Yeah, if you're approved, it's 50%, no
So we
question.
don't know that.
$1,500 will be non-refundable.
Yeah,
And I don't have to submit it until they come up with a percentage.
Is that 50% of what the planet, you come up with $1 million, or you come up with $2 million? That's what it's estimated it's gonna cost. And so the grant is for, at that point, the grant is for, 1 million. But if there are cost overruns and it goes 1,200,000.
yeah,
Does that increment up, or does the city have to come up with the extra cost overrun?
Yeah, so this is kind of the max that you can get.
Okay,
Yeah,
at the begin, it matches at the beginning of the project.
right.
Okay.
So, yeah, so but if it doesn't cost as much, which, you know, we made the call that it looked like these were gonna be, it would benefit to be in the conservative side. So we have healthy numbers. Like I said though, with inflation kinda going hog wild, and, you know, I don't see how this is gonna help inflation.
when somebody says 50%, I mean, it needs to, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. I mean,
Yep.
that's what I figured it would be, but I just wanted to ask the question.
Nope, good question.
Another
Good question.
question.
Yep.
Transmission line, 69 or KW, whatever, going through, goes through residential. What sort of improvements are you gonna put on? Those things are what, 30, 40 years old right now, and that's
So this
the
is
same
basically
transmission
what
line.
we need is the numbers.
Have you got anything planned for like update to metal
Because every
poles or
player
something?
wants that.
Wooden or?
Yeah, you
better
could.
insulators
You're
or-
gonna have to pay
Yes,
them.
so the technology for transmission is basically improved such that the insulators are a polymer,
If they don't approve it, we don't
not porcelain. So today, if you shoot it with your gun, you're gonna break the insulator and the line can come down. So the polymer, you know, if you shoot them, it's not good, but at least it won't drop the line immediately unless you do some like a 50 cal or something. But, so that's the main thing with what we're gonna do. The improvement will be in the design side. They designed them differently back then. They had the spans really long, the poles weren't as big, and we'll design it for 1.5 ice, 50-mile-an-hour concurrent wind. So kind of your worst case ice wind storm. The ones today are not designed that strong, I can guarantee it. They have smaller class poles. The thing that drives the construction type, whether it's wood or steel, generally price conscious there. Wood has been historically cheaper. However, recently wood poles have skyrocketed. They just between the demand really. We're seeing some steel, but steel is certainly an option, and especially if it's like if that's something, if it fits in the budget at that point, certainly gonna look at it, because yeah, steel is gonna last longer. Not gonna have the weathering effects like the wood does, that rots. Steel, you don't have to keep inspecting over the years. Wood poles, you probably should inspect the ground line, see what the rot situation is. So that's kind of the basic stuff. It hasn't changed a ton. You can't go underground with it unless you wanna spend millions. You can, but it's just super cost prohibitive yet. So, thanks.
So going forward, if you get the 50% and we pay 50%, our 50%, will it come from surcharges? Or how is that
No,
repaid?
So when I say it would be hard to do that first, phase, everything I'm trying to do is based on savings, but you need to leave about 800 in savings. You need to have, at least be able to run a full year in order to take care of if something was to happen and you weren't paid. So that would be just based out of savings. And the thing with it is, it'd be hard to do phase one, but if we do phase 1 and 2 and we get the grant, we're actually cheaper than phase 1 to start out with, you know what I'm saying? So that's where this grant is be huge, to be able to actually get 1 and 2 done for less money than what it would have took to do phase 1. And then I was just gonna add to what Jared actually took out of there to get us into the, so they're looking at us, I guess, is work that I actually said I could possibly do anyways. So it would be dirt work, so I'm good with that.
Yeah, it was something where Dustin and I had talked about the project, and he's like, yeah, I could probably just do that, we'll keep it out. And I'm like, you know what, if they're gonna pay for it, let's just keep it in and see where it shakes out. And we probably wouldn't have had to have taken it out, they more or less just were courteous and asked the question if we could reduce the scope of that phase 1. And that was low hanging fruit, and I knew Dustin could probably do it anyway, and, a pretty small portion of that was, 80,000 or so. That's what I estimated it at, based on some pricing that we've seen, so.
So of your total cost for 1.6 million for phase 1, your phase 2 of about 900,000, do you have an inflation factor in there already, or is that today's cost?
Yeah.
And you projected, I'm assuming, an inflation into that, an inflation factor into that, and that's
Yeah,
what
so
you would expect it to
Right, there is, there are some escalators that we're allowed to apply based on the, when you set up this, part of some of the paperwork we're having to do are some of these detailed timelines. So we have, depending on the year that you do the work and the year that those funds are extracted, you're able to add on about 5% each year escalation factor. And so we're able to add on to that, it sounds like, from, these are today's numbers. Now, they're conservative because we know even in a given year, even if we say, no inflation's accounted for and we do it that year, there's gonna be inflation. So we always, we're always looking at, these are bid tabs basically. So we're looking at bid tabs across the region and we're seeing, okay, yeah, we're gonna add 10% here. So there's some fudge factor and, contingencies in there. There's roughly about 20% contingencies in there. So that's why when I say, we add about 20% contingencies to kind of cover, scope creep, how it works. There'll be things you're not expecting and, life happens, with materials and stuff, so.
I might be putting you on the spot, but when you originally did this, and it's been a ways out since you did it,
Mhm.
and then you redid the numbers, do you remember what the percentage was that you said it went like in a year and a half?
Yeah, I wanna say, just looking at this here, I wanna say, that 1.6 was like 1.2 or 3.
That's how much it went up in a year.
Yeah, for sure. It went up probably about 20%. I mean, we're seeing wood pole costs.
I wanna throw that out there, I thought that's what you said.
Wood poles here about doubled. So that's been a big shocker, cause you could get a 75-foot H1 pole for around $3,500 to $4,000. And now we just got quotes, it was like $6,500 to $7,000 for a single pole. So that's some of the crazy stuff we're seeing, and in that situation, a steel pole, where are they at? We'll look at that, we'll weigh that, yeah, so it's tough. And that stuff's just gonna get worse, honestly, so. I hope we get in on this grant, cause I feel like this whole big bill cycle is just gonna hit it's like dumping gasoline on the already burning market, so,
I'm getting supplies.
yeah,
Yep, so.
it's tough.
So the big thing here, like you said, Tammy, I don't wanna have any more surcharges, I don't wanna have any of that added, so to try to do what we can without that, but if we're not moving forward, we're falling behind too. And to have something go down in a storm and pay for it in an emergency situation, them prices probably double, I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty rough on the labor side, especially when you get a big contractor.
Yeah,
Emergency.
especially when they know that you need them. But instead of just having
Yeah.
the time to do it.
50, I'd say 50, a solid 50% more,
So,
but. Yeah, guys, I'll just wrap it up here. Thanks for your time. Any last questions, that's great, but yeah, just, if you guys could just get a authorization for that $1,500 application, we'll get that letter format, and then, looking at preliminary planning phase of about, probably 10 to 15,000, depending on the federal government requirements for these applications. We're learning through this as well, so, appreciate you just bearing with us, and appreciate your guys' business. You're a very, valued client of ours, and we appreciate it, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question.
Oh, yep.
Is the preliminary planning phase only paid for if the grant is awarded?
There's a little bit of stuff we gotta do in the next like 10 days,
But-
pretty minimal.
But the majority is.
If we go forward with the project, we'll have to scope it out. So yeah, that's 95% of that is after we get the grant. I think unless you wanna go forward with some things, because we'll leave that to kinda see how it goes, but.
and, yeah, I guess, we focus on what we need to get done now, and then if anybody's got any questions moving forward, feel free to reach out, and if I can answer them, we can get ahold of Jared, we can keep going through this, and
And any questions, comments, you can email me or get in touch with Dustin or Shayla, and, you know, if you notice anything you guys want changed here in this presentation, we'll get it updated and call it good, so,
So basically, all you need right now is the $1,500.
yeah, that's really about it right now. And then just the letter of commitment, I guess I should elaborate on that, but the letter of commitment that you would be required to provide basically says, you guys are all in, if you get the grant, you're gonna come up with that 50%. So that's the letter of commitment they're looking for. And basically to say, if you're gonna go through this, and if they're gonna drag us through all this, they want that level of commitment. So you would have to have something that says, you know, we're gonna come up with about $1 million or so, or whatever that value is, so.
But right now, we don't know if it's 50%, correct?
Well, it is 50%, so what we,
Okay.
yeah, it's not gonna be any other percent. It'll be 50. So,
If we get anything, you're saying it'll be 50.
yes, if we get anything, it'll be a 50%. It's all or nothing, you know, it's,
Okay.
they're gonna look at it, they're gonna accept this big old regional grant as a project, or they're not. And then that's just what everybody's kinda sitting there flat-footed, looking at each other at that point, I guess, so.
But if we don't, basically, and then if we don't get anything,
Yeah.
we really don't have to do anything. I mean, it's just, it's a way to move forward.
You don't have to do anything, but I do, you know,
Yeah,
to the
well,
point.
I'm just
We
saying
still
you're
need to
not,
do what
At
you're
some point.
proposing, we still need to do.
yeah, it needs to be done.
Right.
Right.
But when you can afford it and
It
when you
might
guys
have to
make
be
that
done at
decision.
a
Yeah, it
slower
might have to
pace.
be in
Right.
increments, we,
Right.
you know, yeah.
If
Right,
there's a grant available, we wanna take advantage of it.
right, and then just with transmission materials and everything, it's
Mhm.
like, how do you double, you know, pole prices in a year, you know? It's just, it's getting tough, but again, guys, thank you, and, any other questions?
I move that we approve the $1,500 application fee.
I'll second.
What was that?
She made a motion, we approve the $1,500 fee. I seconded.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the $1,500 fee. We have a second.
I seconded.
Yeah. We have a motion and a second.
Do we have to, have it separate for the letter?
I would like it separate.
Okay.
So we're gonna vote on this one, and then we need to also for the letter of commitment.
What's your question, no?
This one, we've got the motion and the second for the $1,500 application fee. Let's follow through with that, and then we want another motion for the letter of commitment, so whenever they get it to us,
You want another motion for the,
yeah. So we're ready to go when they get it to us.
we'll have to vote on the one we got. Well, we'll have to vote on the one we got on the motion and the second that's on the floor first. Okay, we have a motion and a second for the $1,500 fee. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I'm gonna vote by roll call. I'm gonna start with Susan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Lecty,
Aye.
Alderman West,
Aye.
Alderman Odegaard,
Aye.
Alderman Zeller. Aye. Alderman McGowan. Is he still on?
Yep. Tom? No, he's still on. He's
Probably
just
got
on
us
mute.
muted.
Tom?
I could, yeah,
Thank you.
Okay,
You're
hearing
welcome.
6 ayes and no
I couldn't get
nays.
that mute button off.
Hearing 6
Okay.
ayes and no nays, Motion carries by unanimous ballot, motion carried. Now you want another motion for,
Just for the letter of commitment, when that comes, so we're ready.
okay, we need a motion for the letter of commitment.
I so move.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the letter of commitment. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none? Oh, I think we'll vote by roll call on that too. I'm gonna start with Alderman McGowan. Okay.
Aye.
Alderman Zeller.
Aye.
Alderman Odegaard.
Aye.
Alderman Wentz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Lexi.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hargan.
Aye.
Hearing 6 ayes and no nays, the motion carried by unanimous ballot. Motion carried. Okay, the next thing on here is number 6. The Governor's Office of Economic Development CIP Award. They found on pages 13 to 14. What do we need from this?
This is just a notification.
That's just an,
They called today and they're gonna get started really quickly on this, so they'll be bugging all the department heads, they're gonna be looking at a lot of the buildings and our finances, and so we're gonna have this ISG here off and on for a few months.
So this is just.
anybody got any
information.
questions
This
about
is just
that?
information, we don't have any.
When's that start?
They just called today and they're gonna be getting started hopefully in the next month or so. They'll start coming and checking things out, right in the middle of your busy time. It'll take all summer, cause they've got several communities.
Okay, we'll move on to number 7 is Olson Construction Change Order number 8. Terry, do you wanna explain that?
You might have to ask Shayla, 'cause this evidently come about when we were out there.
Yeah, this is just adding this, alley to phase 3. And this is, what did you say it was?
Oh,
This is,
okay, I didn't know that this was the one. that-
yep, this is just
This
that,
is the alley that's, east of Carr Clinic.
okay.
There's a city sewer main that goes up that alley, and there used to be a trailer court back in there.
That's just like,
So, the city sewer main goes up that alley, but there's also a water main down that alley. And lots of utilities, and the 2 homes that are hooked up to that have a lot of sewer problems. And I'd like to take that out of there, the main, and install 2 separate lines. So after it's completed, it'll be the homeowner's responsibility after that. There's no sense of having a main going up there. Like there used to be, you know, 'cause there used to be, I don't know how many trailer houses back there. But, it's hard right now, and there's a lot of problems with it. And, basically, if we, the state wants us to use up all our money from phase 3, and they said this is in the budget for it, so. You don't wanna give you money and then you not use it, so.
I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve change order number 8.
This is just one of the workplaces that we've had with sewer problems, you know, 'cause some of the other ones have been fixed, but.
Okay, I move to approve change order number 8.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Olson Construction change order number 8. Is there any more discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Mr. Mayor, I have
opposed,
one.
same.
Terry said something about the, something is going to be within the responsibility of the landowner. Could you repeat that, please?
No, after this is put in, it won't be the city's main anymore. It'll be
Okay.
private sewers for both of them. Like everybody else has their own sewers in their yards.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you.
Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Kayla, you got my eye in there, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay, the next thing on the bill, on the agenda is to approve the bills.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills.
I'll second it.
We got a motion and a second to approve the bills. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Next thing is adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn, is there a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Motion carried, and we're adjourned at 8:21.
How about
I go to Rogers just because I wanted to get everybody. It was on a vote for anyway, and just
Shayla, can you tell me who seconded the change order? Susie made the.
I did.
I thought,
I
but
was
I
the
wasn't.
second king tonight.
You were.
I was gonna make a motion